The next way of presenting data that I'm going to talk about is a table. So you've probably seen tables before. It's any kind of data laid out in a grid. It's usually text or numbers. And two of the advantages of it are that you can represent exact numbers, whereas with a plot or a graph, you're only getting a visual estimate. And that you can show different units. So you could have a different unit for every column in your table, whereas with graph, usually you have one unit for the x-axis and one unit for the y-axis, and that's it. Cons are that you can show hundreds or thousands of points of data on a graph, whereas if you try to show a table with thousands of numbers in it, your brain would melt. And sometimes when you have a really complicated table with lots of information on it, you can lose the big picture pattern because there's all sorts of little tiny numbers. And so basically once you start to have more than like 5 or 6 rows or 5 or 6 columns, you want to start thinking about doing things in one or more figures. So here we have a table. I've illustrated things, but this is people who use PCs, people who use Macs, people who use iPhones, people who use Androids. And then we can have different units, right? These are counts, these are percentages. There's all sorts of stuff you can do. So in this class, one place where I will use the word table, which is kind of idiosyncratic, is when I'm talking about a region of a spreadsheet that contains summaries. So we will often be we'll often have one part of our data set of our spreadsheet that has data, right? So just each column is data. But then might have another place where we're doing some calculations, and I like to organize those with labels that describe what we're summarizing. We might have a situation where every row of the table corresponds to a group, and every column corresponds to a different summary statistic, so we can quickly summarize the summaries even. So that I would usually call these things tables, and they're not like inserted with any kind of menu or anything like that. We're just organizing ourselves when we put them together. Something that is organized with a tool is a pivot table, right? And it's the same kind of thing where you have labels and summaries in a sort of rectangular grid. So that's one of the reasons why I call these things tables, even if we're building them ourselves. Another thing to talk about with tables is SPSS. So SPSS generally creates tables when it does its output, and these tables are often large and complicated, and they usually contain more information than we need for our actual question. They usually have some technical details about how the statistical fit worked, and they also will have every possible combination of parameters. And so one of the things we're going to be learning about in this class when we learn about new statistical techniques and how to do them in SPSS is how to decode the output tables and to extract the things that we're interested from them. So for example, over here in this table, you'll find out that B is the actual estimate. So this is some average for the 1960s here. And weekday 2 is Monday, so this would be the average for Mondays. So we'll be able to pull those things apart, and then your job is going to be to take those outputs and turn them into text or simpler tables that your consumer who's not an SPSS expert will be able to understand.